So you grew up, I mean, again, so the Depression was the, right, 1920s, early 30s, right? So you were born in 36 at the end of the Depression. How did that impact you when you were growing up when you were little?
When we were little, back then when the war was going on, you had K rations.
So you mean World War II, right?
World War II, and gasoline you couldn't buy unless you had a stamp. And on the stamp you might have a letter E, B, C, or D, and you put that on your windshield of your car. And on that particular day, you could go to the gas station and buy $3 worth of gas. And people didn't go very far. They just went to work and home because you didn't have gas. The gas was rationed to everybody.
Well, and again, back in the day when you were growing up, you said they drove to work.
Yes.
Work wasn't very far, right? I mean, today we drive 30 miles to work and it's nothing. How far was work back then?
Work back then was probably 10 miles to work, which was a long ways back then. And many people rode the bus or a streetcar. Now, we used to go to downtown Detroit on a streetcar when we lived on Outer Drive.
And how far was that?
And that was approximately 3 to 4 miles on a streetcar, and it was the only form of transportation we had. In fact, my dad took the streetcar to work every day. And I used to sit in the living room of my house on Outer Drive, and I would watch my father come home from work. I'd see him get off of the streetcar, walk into a neighborhood bar, and sit in there probably for an hour and a half or so, and have a few beers, and then I'd see him walk across the field to our house. And then we'd sit down and have dinner as a family. And my father always drank a beer out of a juice glass. He would take the bottle of beer, put it on the table, and he always sat at the kitchen table with the juice glass so he would make it feel like it was lasting longer.
So you used to go downtown Detroit on the streetcar. You told me stories about going to Lions games. Your dad used to run the scoreboard or something like that?
Right. At Briggs Stadium, at that particular time during football season, both teams sat on the same side of the field, and there was approximately 30 yards between the two benches.
Now you said Briggs Stadium. What's Briggs Stadium?
That's the Tiger Stadium was called Briggs Stadium back then. They changed the name from Briggs Stadium to Tiger Stadium. And between these two benches was an open area where there was a green box approximately 4 feet long and maybe 3 feet high. And I would sit on that box and I would run the score clock that was out in center field that told the players how much time was left in every quarter. And I got to sit there and go to all the ball games free. My dad would go up and sit in the press box where it was warm and have free hot dogs, free beer, free sandwiches, potato chips, and I would sit down in the screen box and freeze my buns off while he was enjoying himself.
Well, you were doing his job for him, because wasn't it his job to keep the clock?
It was his job to keep the clock, and I ran that clock for 3 years at a very young age, and I had a ball. I saw players, Frank Sinchowitz, Leon Hart, I could name you players that nobody's ever heard of before, and they were just fantastic. Bull McMullen, he was just a wonderful coach, and these coaches used to sit and scream at each other. One play in particular, one coach turned to the other coach and says, "He was out of bounds." And the other coach turned and says, "Oh yeah, and your ass is out of bounds too." Pretty funny, isn't it? That went on during all the games. It was hilarious.
How old were you when you did that?
I was 14 years old. I did it till I was 17.
Well, I want to go back to my brother. As I said, he's 4 years younger than me. He was born the day before Halloween, October 30th, 1940. So he was a Halloween baby. But I forgot to say that I do remember Pearl Harbor. It was a Sunday morning, obviously. My dad was sitting in the living room reading the Sunday paper, and I was coloring, laying on the floor. That was my favorite pastime.
We went with each other for 9 months, and I proposed to her, and we got married in 1958. We were married for approximately 2 years when we had our first child, Richard A. Close Jr.
Hey, let me-
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine.